A small cafe in Atlanta hums quietly with the familiar rhythms of daily life, unnoticed by the city rushing past its windows. Behind the counter, Maya, a 32-year-old waitress, speaks softly in Spanish to a customer, unaware that a sharp-eyed man sitting alone at a corner table is watching her closely. This chance moment, seemingly insignificant, will unravel more than just a conversation. It will stir the quiet strength hidden beneath the surface of an invisible life and challenge the assumptions of a powerful stranger. Here begins a story about the unseen, the overlooked, and the profound value resting in everyday dignity. Maya adjusted the worn strap of her apron and let out a quiet sigh as she pushed open the door to the cafe. The early morning light spilled through the windows, casting long shadows across the linoleum floor, worn smooth by years of footsteps. The scent of freshly ground coffee beans mixed with the faint, oily aroma of the grill. Familiar, comforting, but heavy with routine. Her shoes clicked softly against the floor, heels tapping a steady rhythm as she moved behind the counter, setting out menus and wiping down tables. It was another day, the kind of day where she blended into the background, a ghost among faces in this little spot on Auburn Avenue. Maya felt the weight of invisibility settle over her like a familiar cloak. She was tired, not just the physical exhaustion from double shifts, but a deep kind of weariness that came from years of being unseen. Still, this was her life, her reality. The steady hum of the espresso machine, the clink of ceramic cups, the low murmur of early patrons. This was what kept the bills paid and food on the table. She moved through her routine, smiling politely when customers approached, nodding in greeting. Her voice shifted effortlessly between English and Spanish, an unspoken bridge she built quietly at tables scattered throughout the room. "Que desea?" she asked a man at the counter with a gentle tone. Some guests appreciated her language, others glanced sideways, their eyes hard or impatient. Once she overheard a snide remark from a nearby table. "Why is she speaking Spanish here? This is America." The words stung, but Maya didn't respond. She had learned long ago that some battles weren't hers to fight. Behind her, the other servers shared jokes and laughter, but the sounds didn't reach Maya's ears. She heard their voices dip low when she passed, their smiles tight and dismissive. "Just a waitress," she heard someone whisper once. "Not the kind of person who belongs at the big tables." The words lodged in her chest. She wanted to scream, to prove them wrong, but the years of quiet acceptance had taught her restraint. She kept her head down and did her job. In a rare moment between orders, Maya let her mind wander back to a different time. Her early 20s, when she was a student with dreams too big to ignore. She remembered late nights poring over textbooks, fascinated by science, hoping to become a researcher, maybe even a professor. But life had a way of rerouting plans. Family needs, bills, the pressure to survive, all pulled her away from that path. The dreams hadn't died. They had just been shelved. The bell above the door jingled softly, drawing Maya's attention. A sharply dressed man stepped inside, his polished shoes tapping a confident beat on the floor. He glanced around, taking in the modest decor, the scattered tables, the warm light. This was Thomas, CEO of a large tech company, far from the boardrooms and glass towers he usually inhabited. A business meeting had brought him to the neighborhood, but something about the cafe drew his eye. He noticed Maya instantly, her careful posture, the way her hands moved with quiet purpose. Then, a surprising thing happened. Maya spoke to a guest in Spanish, her voice calm and clear. Thomas watched her, curiosity flickering behind his measured gaze. Here was someone who didn't fit his usual template. She wasn't flashy or loud, She wasn't the polished professional he expected in his world, but she carried herself with a dignity that made him pause. Thomas found himself watching more intently. He noted how Maya handled her tasks, switching seamlessly between customers, managing trays and orders with a grace that suggested discipline and intelligence. It unsettled him, the contrast between her role here and the life he knew. A subtle conflict stirred within him, between the neat categories he was used to and this complex reality unfolding in front of him. Across the room, Maya was aware of the stares, some skeptical, some dismissive. A regular patron, an older man with a gruff voice, made a cutting comment as she brought his food. "Try not to mess it up today, chica," he said with a smirk. Maya met his gaze steadily, her jaw tight. The words were meant to belittle, but she refused to show weakness. Instead, she smiled faintly, a shield rather than a surrender. Suddenly, Thomas stepped forward, surprising both Maya and the surrounding tables. "Could I get a coffee, please?" he asked, voice calm but firm. Maya blinked, caught off guard by the attention from the stranger. "Of course," she replied, her voice steady despite the flutter in her chest. As she prepared his order, Thomas struck up a conversation, careful, curious. "I heard you speaking Spanish back there. That's impressive." Maya glanced at him, unsure how much to reveal. "I grew up bilingual," she said simply. "It helps at work." The words were plain, but beneath them lay years of lived experience. Thomas nodded, sensing the weight behind her tone. "You handle this place well." It wasn't a compliment laced with pity, but a genuine recognition. Maya's fingers tightened around the cup she handed him. "I do what I can." A moment of silence fell between them, filled only by the soft hum of the cafe's appliances. Then Thomas, almost impulsively, followed her toward the kitchen door. Maya stopped, heart quickening. The back of the cafe was a different world. Hot, noisy, crowded with pots and pans, sizzling grills and the clatter of plates. Here, the reality of her work was raw and unvarnished. Thomas watched as Maya moved with practiced efficiency, coordinating with cooks and dishwashers, navigating the chaos with quiet command. His usual world of spreadsheets and board meetings felt distant and sterile in comparison. Maya caught his glance, a flicker of nervousness crossing her features. This was her realm, but exposure to it was unfamiliar, intimate. "Most people don't see this side," she said, voice low, almost hesitant. "It's not glamorous." Thomas shook his head, eyes steady. "No, it's real. That's what matters." Maya looked away, cheeks flushed. The tension between them was palpable, uneasy, charged with something neither yet named. In that moment, something shifted. The invisible line between the worlds they inhabited thinned. Maya felt seen, not as a stereotype, not as a servant, but as a person. And Thomas, for the first time, felt the stirrings of understanding beyond his usual perceptions. The air between them held a fragile promise that beneath the surface of ordinary lives lay extraordinary stories waiting to be acknowledged. Thomas stood just inside the kitchen doorway, the heat from the stoves brushing against his face like a sudden gust of summer air. Maya wiped her hands on her apron, eyes flicking briefly toward him, before she turned back to the bubbling pots and sizzling pans. The noise was a sharp contrast to the quiet calm of the dining room. Clanging, shouting, orders barked and repeated. It was chaos, but controlled chaos, and Maya moved through it with a kind of quiet authority that made Thomas pause. He hadn't expected this. The waitress he'd seen moments ago was something else entirely here. Not invisible, not quiet, but essential. She barked a quick instruction in Spanish to a cook, then switched to English, smoothing tensions between two flaring tempers. Her voice was steady, confident, even kind when she softened her tone for the youngest dishwasher. Thomas realized he'd been wrong to see her as just a server. Maya's gaze caught his again, and there was something almost wary in her eyes, like she wasn't sure what he was doing here, or why he'd come this far. She folded her arms, leaning slightly against the counter as if preparing for judgment. Thomas swallowed past his own awkwardness. "I wanted to see how things really work back here," he said simply. Maya's lips twitched, half a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. Not many people do. She paused, then added, "Especially not someone like you." The words hung in the humid air. Thomas felt the weight of them, the distance between their worlds, laid bare. "I'm trying," he said quietly. The sound of boots on the tile floor made Maya stiffen. A fellow waitress passed by, casting a glance at Thomas before shooting Maya a pointed smirk. "Look who brought company to the kitchen," she whispered loud enough for Maya to hear. Maya's jaw tightened. Thomas caught the flicker of resentment in her eyes, a shield she raised instinctively. Later, back in the dining room, Thomas sat at his table nursing his coffee, watching Maya move among the tables with practiced ease. He noticed how she caught a young mother struggling with her restless child and spoke softly in Spanish, soothing the little boy with a gentle tone. The scene stirred something unfamiliar in Thomas, an impulse to protect, to understand beyond his usual judgments. When Maya returned to the counter, Thomas called her over. "Can we talk?" His voice was low, deliberate. She hesitated, then nodded, pulling a chair close to his. He leaned forward. "I want to help. Not with handouts, but real opportunities. You have more than I ever expected." Maya's fingers tapped nervously on the table. "I don't know if I'm ready for that," she said. "I've spent so long just getting by. Change isn't easy." Thomas nodded, the weight of her words settling in. "No one said it would be, but sometimes the hardest step is the first one." His eyes searched hers, earnest and unyielding. She looked down, her voice barely above a whisper. "My mother told me once, you don't have to be someone important to do important things. Maybe that's what keeps me here." Thomas smiled softly. "That's exactly why you matter." Days passed and Thomas kept returning, each time peeling back layers Maya thought were hidden. He invited her to a meeting at his company, an opportunity to explore training programs she never dreamed of. Fear gnawed at her, tangled with hope. The whispers among her colleagues grew louder. Not all were pleased. "What's she trying to prove?" one muttered. Another gave a half-hearted nod, as if to say, "Maybe she deserves it." One afternoon, Maya stood outside the break room, overhearing snide comments. Her breath hitched, fists clenched, but before she could retreat, Thomas appeared, cutting through the murmurs. "She's with me," he said quietly but firmly. For the first time, Maya felt something she hadn't in years. Support that wasn't just words, but action. The tension between her doubts and the possibilities stretched taut, but she took the offer, stepping tentatively into a world where her value wasn't invisible. Her first victory came quietly, a small project completed, a task praised. The look on her colleagues' faces was mixed, some surprised, some grudgingly respectful. Maya met their eyes steadily, the flicker of a smile breaking through. It wasn't just about her anymore. It was about changing what they all thought possible. Together, Maya and Thomas began to talk about more than just her future. They discussed ways to improve working conditions for everyone in the cafe, to build bridges between those at the bottom and those at the top. The divide was vast, but the first cracks were beginning to show. Late one evening, after the cafe had closed, Maya leaned against the counter, exhaustion tugging at her limbs. Thomas stood beside her, quiet, his gaze thoughtful. "You've changed this place," he said. Maya glanced up, a tired but genuine smile curving her lips. "Maybe it's just the beginning." And in that moment, the air between them was charged, not with promises easily broken, but with a fragile hope that something real could grow from the smallest, quietest acts. The room was bright and humming, the midday light filtering through tall windows and catching on the gleam of polished tables. Maya stood at the front, her voice steady despite the tremor she felt inside. Faces turned toward her, colleagues, managers, even a few familiar regulars. The room held its breath as she spoke. "You don't have to be someone important to do important things," Maya said, eyes sweeping the crowd, catching the flickers of surprise and something softer. Respect. Her words weren't rehearsed or grandiose. They were simple truths, shaped by years of struggle, hope, and quiet endurance. The room responded with a stillness that felt like the turning of a tide. Behind the scenes, the company was already shifting. A new support program launched, aimed at employees often overlooked. The servers, the dishwashers, the cooks. Maya and Thomas worked together, their partnership growing from cautious respect to genuine collaboration. They pushed for changes, better schedules, access to education, fairer wages. Each small victory rippled outward, touching lives beyond the walls of the cafe. Maya felt the change too. The wary glances of her co-workers softened, replaced by nods and tentative smiles. Where once she was invisible, she was becoming a symbol, a quiet emblem of strength and possibility. It was a role she never sought, but learned to carry with grace. Outside the cafe, the story spread through the city like a whispered secret growing louder. Maya's journey became a beacon for those who felt unseen, a reminder that dignity and value often hide in the most ordinary places. A local foundation stepped forward, inspired by her story, to create scholarships for workers with untold potential. One afternoon, Maya found herself standing in front of a classroom of young people. Her voice was calm, steady as she shared her path, without gloss or drama, just the real, hard truth. "Dreams don't have deadlines," she told them, "and sometimes the road twists, but you keep walking." In the cafe, a new symbol appeared, a simple badge with Maya's name and story pinned near the register. It was more than decoration. It was a statement, a daily reminder of what people often overlook. Customers paused to read it, some smiling, others thoughtful. For Maya, it was a quiet victory, a piece of her history honored in the place that had once felt like a cage. Thomas and Maya stood side by side one evening at a community fundraiser. Their friendship was no longer defined by power or status, but by mutual respect and shared purpose. As they watched the crowd, Maya's hand brushed against Thomas's briefly. A small gesture, but one loaded with unspoken meaning. Later, alone in the quiet of the cafe, Maya traced her fingers over the worn countertop, feeling the smooth grooves carved by countless hands before hers. A deep sense of peace settled inside her, a calm born of knowing she had changed not just her own life, but touched others in ways she hadn't imagined. Her gaze lifted to the city skyline beyond the window. The lights flickered on one by one, steady beacons in the night. Somewhere in the distance, life carried on, fast and indifferent. But here, In this small corner, something had shifted. Maya's voice softened as she spoke to herself, a gentle promise and a quiet challenge all at once. You don't have to be someone important to change the world. And with that, the story closed, leaving a door open, a space for hope, and the stirring of possibility in the hearts of those who dare to look beyond what they see.